Okay, so this is our second session with some, I did some free shaping with him a couple days ago on this, and so we're gonna see after he's had a day off and we're back on, so we're gonna see how he does with it. He was scared of this thing to begin with. He's kind of a big weenie about new things. It takes him a little bit to come around, so we've just been doing some touch. Good boy, good boy. He's still kind of got an idea of what we're doing. Good. So this right here is free shaping. So when we're conditioning a new behavior, free shaping is a great way to start off with something. Hey, come back. Don't wander off. He got a big piece, so he's like, all right, that's good enough, I'm done. Ibizans are fun to work with. They're different than training your standard like shepherd breeds and labs and other breeds that are very, people work motivated. Sit. Good boy. Okay, light. Good light. Good light. Good boy. So this is service dog task work. What I have here is I have one of these paddle switches for turning lights off and on. So another thing that I'm doing is making the noise so we make sure that he's not freaked out about it. So see how he's kind of like, I don't like that thing, it makes noise. Light. Good boy, good boy. He's also not particularly hungry because he's been eating and kind of munching all day. Come here. Light. Good boy, good boy. So he's being weary again, and so I'm going to reward attempts because he's not quite coming all the way up to it. Good boy, good boy. But on the free shaping, I'm only going to reward when he makes actual contact with it. When I tell him light and he puts his nose up there, good boy, I'm going to let him have a treat. Now we're going to remove it and wait a second while I break up some more treats. But when I'm free shaping it, so I'm kind of switching back and forth between using a command and not using a command. I want him to know what I want him to do when this is around. So right now I have this as a handheld device, so I'm moving it around and things like that. It's important when you're doing this at home with your dogs, and you'll see me kind of holding the treats with it sometimes, but generally at home you want to have your treats in another hand. Good. Because we want to make a definite distinction that they are going for the target object, good, and not going for your hand. Good boy, good boy, good boy. And so we'll shape this as we get going. Good boy. Where what I'll start to do is I'll start to ask him to press a little bit harder, because if we're going to turn this off and on, obviously it's going to take a little bit of work to actually press that. It's not going to be as simple as just touching it and it turns on or off. So what we're going to do is I'll start to ask him to press a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And then the next step will be to start with this thing actually mounted on something. And so you have a couple of different options with that. You can take a piece of plywood and actually mount this on a piece of plywood and create a board, but we want it low. We want it dog level. Good boy, not up high where it would normally be. So the next step is to start raising it a little bit at a time while it's fixed in a fixed location. Light. Good. Good boy. Light. Good boy. Good boy. Light. Good. Okay, so I kind of ignored him there when he touched it, and he looked at me like, wait, aren't I supposed to get a treat? So this is where we build a little bit of frustration, and see he'll touch a little bit harder. Good boy. Good boy. So he nudged it a little bit that time. So free shaping is very powerful because the dog learns there's a response when I do a behavior, and when we take the response away, we withhold for a minute, and we start to ask for longer contact, harder contact, and we start to reward for those things, and it kind of ups the ante for the dog, if you will. Good boy. And so he's going to try a little bit harder because he knows that there's a treat at the end of the tunnel, but how do we get there? And we just make that tunnel a little bit longer, a little bit at a time. Now, if you go with big jumps, like all of a sudden I'm wanting him to actually get the switch to turn, he's not ready for that right now, and that would be an unreasonable expectation, and I would be setting him up for failure. Light? Svasti, light? Good. Good. So I withheld a little bit longer with the command. Good. Because we do want this to become a command. Good. Back to a little bit of free shaping. Light? Light? Good. Good. So he bumped it pretty good that time. Light? Light? Good boy. Good boy. Good. Good boy. So when I initially started this, he was super freaked out about this thing. And so what I was doing with it was I was telling him light, and I was moving it towards his face. And then I would tell him, good boy, and I would give him a treat every time he would come near it. Good boy, good boy. And so he kind of put 2 and 2 together, that this thing equals beef lung tips, which he thinks is just fantastic. Good boy, good boy. So if you're training a service dog in your home, I always suggest getting these paddle style switches. They're much easier for the dogs to turn. They can be taught to use regular light switches. Good boy. But it's much more difficult for them to figure out. I know, we're putting it away. What's happening? What? We're done with it. We're done with it. We're going to put it away. So the paddle switches, obviously that would be a huge endeavor if you have a bunch of light switches in your house. So I always suggest starting with the ones that are the most important. So some of the things that we use this for is like when I've got a client that has PTSD. I work with a lot of veterans, and if they wake up in the middle of the night to a nightmare, what we can teach is we can teach the dog to go and turn the light switch on for them so that they're not sitting there in the dark after a nightmare. I also have clients that have PTSD, anxiety disorders, trauma, different things like that. And so these are some of the things that psychological service dogs can do for people. A lot of people think, oh, they just provide comfort, and that's not the case at all. I had one person in particular a few years ago who had been attacked in their home. And so whenever they would come home after dark, they worked until like 6 or 7 p.m. And in the wintertime, it would be dark when they would get home. And so what we taught that person's dog to do was to go inside and turn on the kitchen light. And so we switched out that light switch instead of switching out a whole bunch of light switches in their house. We just switched out the ones that the dog will be using. And if you want to start to generalize it and have them turning on more and more lights, like if you have serious mobility issues and turning lights off and on throughout your entire house is not feasible for you, then you could switch out more lights throughout your house. And they're not super expensive. That whole entire setup there, I bought the paddle switch at Walmart in the home improvement section for $6. And then the little square thing that goes around it was like $2 and some change. So that's what we're working on with Svasti. He's been my service dog, demo dog. He's only a year old, so we're still kind of new into training with this kind of stuff. But we're definitely kind of testing him to see what all he can learn and what all he can do, and kind of playing around with him. He is very smart and very willing to learn. Yes, you are. You're a good boy, huh? And he'll do anything for treats, won't you? He'll do anything for treats, huh? Anyways, so there's a little bit of information on training light switches for service dogs. You guys have a good day.